Hi, welcome back to my channel, and today I am going to talk about these 7 writer mistakes that I still make. So I made another video where I talked about the 7 writing mistakes that beginning writers make, and I will link that video up here. I'm making this video because it has been a few years since I started writing, and so I thought that I would come back and talk to you guys about the fact that writers are always learning and growing. We always make mistakes, we always have things that we can learn about, develop in our writing. So I thought I would make this video about 7 mistakes that I still notice that I make right now in my writing journey. So the first writing mistake that I have noticed in this writing journey is that I have made characters with unclear motivations. If the plot is moving at a different pace than your character's needs and wants, then that is going to become very apparent to readers of your novel. What I mean here is that sometimes there is something that's happening in the greater world where your character is reacting to it, but what is it that your character wants? What is it that your character would do no matter how the world outside is moving and shaping them? So say you have a world that is in political turmoil and your character's home has been destroyed, so they have to move. So is their motivation that they just want to find a new home, or is their motivation that their family was also killed and they want revenge? So that's just something to think about. Sometimes the characters need something to clearly be driving them as their internal motivation, aside from the external motivations that are happening because of what the world is doing to our characters. Number 2 is filter words. I use these all the time. Things like, he saw the rain falling. So he did see the rain falling, but you don't need to even say that. You could just say the rain was falling or something like that. Things like, he felt sad. He heard the bell ring. It seemed as if she was upset. These things are considered filter words, and what they're doing is that they are giving you details about the world, observations about the world through an additional lens. So you're not even getting the information first or second hand, you're kind of getting it third hand, and therefore it gets a little bit more muddled and it becomes a little bit more unclear. And when you take away these filter words, the sentence becomes much more declarative, much more descriptive, and it just makes things a little bit more straightforward for the readers. You could just say, she was upset, he was sad, the bell rang, the rain fell, those types of things. The next thing I do is something that I don't think I have gotten over and will not get over for a while, and that's because I use cliches and stereotypes sometimes to describe things. Something like saying it was raining cats and dogs. That implies that it was pouring rain outside, but that is also kind of a cliche to say. And sometimes these cliches actually have been called out in some other videos that I have seen of things that just people are tired of seeing because it's so overused. A lot of these are things in YA like she didn't know she was holding her breath as a reason for why she was surprised or shocked or couldn't handle the situation that's in front of her. And I don't think it's bad to use these things sometimes, but when you're using them constantly in order to give a shortcut of the emotional depth or the emotional impact of a scene, then maybe you are taking shortcuts. And it is nice practice to kind of come away from these cliches and these phrases that are shortcuts and see if you can challenge yourself to be a better writer by explaining it in a unique way. Number 4 is something that I have seen YA going away from, and I'm so happy, but for some reason in my past manuscripts I was so caught up on this and it really tripped me up, and it's making bland villains. So making two-dimensional boring villains. I think that we can all agree that our main characters need to be fleshed out and developed and have great relationships and have great backstory, and we can even say that about our love interests and things like that. But sometimes we create these villains that are just flat and evil. They're evil for evil's sake, and that just doesn't resonate with me. I remember when I was younger and I was watching Disney movies, and there were these villains that just didn't make any, that were just evil, and I didn't care about them. And then I remember watching The Lion King, and the Scar as a villain, he is just evil and he does just want power, but it just seems such an interesting dynamic that it was his brother that he was overthrowing, the things that he did to his nephew. He seemed more developed merely because of the relationships he had. It was just such a simple thing for them to create a villain that was just a little bit more developed. You gotta create a villain that has more layers, and I will say that that has been happening more and more, even to the point where some of our villain characters or anti-hero characters are getting a spotlight, like in stories like Forest of a Thousand Lanterns, where it's the rise of the evil queen. So I just think that that is such a great thing that's happening in young adult, and we should incorporate that into our stories, and we should just think about why a villain is doing what they're doing. Like, what about them makes them think that this is the good life choice for them? Because no one wakes up and no one goes through life thinking, you know what I want to be? A villain. That's like my life goal, just to be evil for evil's sake. So talking about bland characters, the fifth mistake that I make and that I'm really trying not to do is bland side characters, like cookie cutter side characters. You know what I'm talking about. Those things that are such cliches that they talk about them in those like trope websites, like the funny best friend or the angry ex-girlfriend or the quirky sidekick. They seem to only exist in order to develop the main character, and I think that that's the problem. When we see our side characters as only existing to develop our main characters, of course they're gonna seem like cookie cutter, flat, two-dimensional characters. Instead, what I really am trying to do is to create a backstory, motivation, and reasoning for my side characters as well. So that if I decided that I was gonna write a book about them, even if it didn't have a lot of plot and action because they weren't doing as many exciting things as my main character, they'd at least have good character moments, and they'd at least have things that they wanted and goals that they strive for. And then using those backstories that I create for my side characters, that's how I decide how they will interact with my main character. The sixth thing that I do, and I think that this is kind of something I couldn't realize until I had been writing more, is that I explain the emotions of my characters in a way where I want my readers to feel the same emotion. And that's wrong, because the feelings that we're eliciting in our readers actually should be different than what the main characters are feeling, for a very good reason. Especially if you're reading something like a dystopian where everyone is starving and in pain, you don't want your readers to be starving and in pain, but you do want them to feel a certain type of empathy and sympathy for your characters. And a really good book that I have learned a lot about this from is The Emotional Craft of Fiction, and that is kind of where I understood the idea that yes, we want to elicit a feeling in our readers, but we don't need to be eliciting the same feeling our characters are feeling within our readers. We are triggering something that's wholly personal for our readers when they read our story, and their experience of the story will be very personal to them. So the final mistake that I make is impatience and not editing enough. I will say I am very, very lucky because I have an amazing editorial agent. I have an amazing editor for my manuscript right now, but I will say that sometimes I get super impatient, especially when revisions are taking longer than you want it to take, or just when you're drained and you're tired and you're like, I've been working on this book for years at this point and I just want it to be done, and you just send it in and then immediately you find like mistakes and typos and things like that afterwards. The moments when you're feeling like over it, take a beat, step away for a little bit, however long you can do it. If it's an hour, if it's a day, if it's a week, step away for as long as you can, and then come back and do just one final read before you send it in to your agent or your editor. I think that it'll just help us to make sure that we are doing the best work that we can. We did our due diligence, we turned in the best manuscript we could, and now we're sending it off and asking them for their opinions and for their insights into helping us write the best story we can. Okay, so those are the 7 writer mistakes that I still make to this day, and I'm hoping to get over. If you like this video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up or a subscription to this channel. And if you have any comments or questions, I'd love to see those as comments down below, or you can tweet at me at CatShow, and I will see everybody next time. Bye!